On a quiet Sunday afternoon in the year 1964, a teenage boy stepped out of his house to feed his dogs. He never returned, leaving behind a mystery that has haunted his family and baffled investigators for decades. This is the story of Reed Jeppson, a 15-year-old from Salt Lake City, whose disappearance along with his 2 German short-haired pointers remains one of the most perplexing unsolved cases in Utah's history. It was October 11th, a crisp autumn day that began like any other for the Jeppson family. They had just returned from church, a weekly ritual for the devout Mormon household of 11 children. Reed, a sophomore at East High School, was the kind of boy who seemed to have it all together. An Eagle Scout, a good student, and a paper boy who saved his earnings, he was well-liked and dependable. That afternoon, as the family settled in, Reed grabbed a can of dog food and turned to his sister Suzanne. "I'm going to feed the dogs," he said casually. "I'll be back in time for dinner," Suzanne nodded, reminding him the meal would be ready in 30 minutes. Dressed in a reversible black parka with blue lining and Levis jeans, Reed stepped outside and walked the 200 yards to the family's dog kennel. That was the last time anyone in the Jeppson home saw him. As the clock ticked past the half-hour mark, unease crept into the house. Suzanne peered out the window expecting to see Reed ambling back, perhaps with a tale of his dog's latest antics. But the path stayed empty. By nightfall, after nearly 12 hours with no sign of him, the family contacted the Salt Lake City Police Department. A missing persons report was filed, and a search began that would stretch across days, states, and eventually decades. Reed Taylor Jeppson was born on May 28, 1949, to Elizabeth and Edward Jeppson. He was one of many siblings in a bustling, faith-filled home where hard work and community were prized. Reed stood out even among his peers, responsible, kind, and driven. He loved the outdoors, often spending hours training his 2 German short-haired pointers to hunt birds. One was a full-grown dog, the other a puppy, and they were his pride and joy. He also played football for his school, recently celebrating his first touchdown, a small triumph that hinted at a bright future. At 15, Reed was poised between boyhood and the wider world, a life full of promise that vanished in an instant. The search for Reed was immediate and exhaustive. Police, joined by the Jeppson family and local volunteers, scoured Salt Lake City and its surrounding foothills. They searched woods, checked ravines, and followed every possible trail, but neither Reed nor his dogs left a trace. A friend claimed to have seen him walking the dogs near the College of St. Mary of the Wasatch, about 50 minutes from home, around 1 p.m. that day, but the sighting couldn't be confirmed. Others reported glimpsing the dogs roaming free, though these accounts were dismissed as unreliable. Authorities in 3 states were alerted, and one lead suggested Reed might have headed to Missouri to visit a girl he'd met while working on a ranch the previous summer. But that trail, like so many others, led nowhere. Complicating matters was the question of money. Some reports claimed Reed had about $60, roughly $582 in today's money, saved from his paperboy job, possibly on him that day. If true, why would he carry such a sum for a quick errand? Other sources disputed this, leaving yet another thread dangling in the wind. With no physical clues, the police turned to those closest to Reed. His older brother John, then 16, was singled out after a tip from a friend hinted he might know something. A detective took John for a drive, pressing him hard. "Where is he?" the officer demanded. "You're hiding him, and you're breaking your parents' hearts." John, shaken but resolute, insisted he knew nothing. The detective eventually relented, and John was never questioned again. Another suspect emerged, a doctor living next to the Jeppsons' backyard, a known pedophile with a history of abusing teenage boys. During questioning, his words chilled the officers. "I'd appreciate your finding out who killed him," he said, chuckling. When pressed on how he knew Reed was dead rather than a runaway, he replied, "This length of time, they're never gonna find out." Despite his unsettling demeanor, investigators found no evidence of violence beyond his known crimes and cleared him. Theories swirled in the absence of facts. The Jeppsons believed Reed was abducted, convinced he'd never leave willingly. Suzanne later confided to her mother, "I believe a pedophile got a hold of him." It had to have been. Others speculated an animal attack or a freak accident like falling into a cave in the foothills. But no blood, no tracks, No remains supported these ideas. By 1966, with no breakthroughs, the case was closed, though the family's search for answers never stopped. The loss of Reed shattered the Jeppsons. Just over a year later, on December 18, 1965, Edward Jeppson took his own life, overwhelmed by grief and uncertainty. Elizabeth and several siblings passed away in the decades that followed, each without closure. Suzanne Tate, Reed's sister, carried the burden for 57 years. When someone goes missing, the whole family suffers, she said. First it's worry, then frustration, then despair. You just keep thinking, what happened to my little brother? What did he go through? The pain lingered, an open wound that time couldn't heal. In 2010, nearly half a century later, the Salt Lake City police reopened the case. Detective Cody Lowy appealed to the public. Somebody out there knows something. DNA was collected from surviving family members to match against unidentified remains, and an age-progressed image of Reed was released, imagining him as an older man. 2 years later, in 2012, a couple living on the former property of the suspicious doctor found animal bones, dismembered and bagged, possibly from 2 dogs, one large, one small. Suzanne believed they were Reed's, but a police search with cadaver dogs and a backhoe turned up nothing. Officer Josh Ashdown called the tip compelling enough to investigate, yet it too yielded no answers. Reed Jeppson's disappearance remains the oldest unsolved missing persons case in Salt Lake City. A headstone in the local cemetery bears his name, birth date, and the day he vanished, October 11, 1964. We feel like our family was robbed of a wonderful addition, Suzanne said. His chance for life was stolen from him. Cold case investigator Corden Parks still hopes to interview Reed's classmates. Authorities urge anyone with information to come forward. Until then, the mystery endures. A quiet Sunday afternoon frozen in time, a boy and his dogs lost to history, and a family left to wonder forever, searching for the truth.